Myths and legends often hold a grain of truth, a sliver of something extraordinary veiled by the passage of time. Tales of strange lights in the sky, figures descending from the heavens, and encounters with the unexplained. These echo through the histories of countless cultures. Could these be mere flights of fancy, or fragments of a reality concealed within the mists of our past? This startling collection of photos from across the ages demands closer examination. Faded images offer tantalizing glimpses into forgotten corners of our world, raising profound and unsettling questions. Did those before us witness something unimaginable? Or have crucial pieces of history been erased? Prepare to explore the visual evidence and confront the possibility that the truth behind ancient encounters has been hiding in plain sight.
Introducing Go Pills, the pill that keeps you up for 40 hours straight. What could possibly go wrong? When the government tried creating these new pills, the right idea was in mind. Or so we think. Overnight workers, military, maybe you need to cram 3 days of studying in one night. You name it. The US Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, was supposed to have your back. What happened? The Air Force has around 100 fatal crashes on record because of fatigued pilots. So US military was actively trying to create a solution for these physically demanding jobs. The closest that we have now to these Go Pills are something called modafinil, which is a narcotic approved by the Air Force to combat said fatigue, but it's not public yet, of course, obviously. Do you think these government Go Pills will ever make it to the public? I mean, I think coffee makes people crazy enough in the mornings. I'm all set personally. I'm on like coffee number 4. I'm jazzed up right now. Number 9, the heart attack gun. Sounds like a pretty calm weapon right there. The CIA had this weapon, and it was more of a dart gun than anything, but you know, heart attack gun sounds pretty on the nose for this list. It shot a frozen dart filled with a specific toxin that, you guessed it, gave you a heart attack. Pretty James Bond, right? It was frozen so that the dart would ideally melt away after it's done its damage. You know, destroying all the evidence, right? It's like some icicle killer stuff right there. That's some next level. There we go. It took me 17 seconds to remember what an icicle was called. I was like, what are those long, drippy, frozen things? The icicles. The CIA was really into poisons during the Cold War and apparently darts. Match made in heaven. The public caught wind of all this thanks to Senator Frank Church, and when Congress decided to look into where these tax dollars were going, they found a plethora of illegal methods used by not only the CIA, but also the NSA and the FBI and the IRS. A lot of letters coming in, a lot of sketchy letters. Frozen darts, that's insane. That's a confusing way to go out. You'd have no idea what happened. You'd be like, ugh, brr, ow. Like, it'd be that fast, that's crazy. Number 8. Project Iceworm. Ooh, speaking of cold, here we go. Back in the 1960s, under the Greenland ice sheet, the US Army started to build a mobile nuclear missile launch site, okay? It was codenamed Project Iceworm. It's a pretty fun name because it's cold and underground. We get it, right? Nice. The idea was that they would build the station close enough so that they could hit targets within the Soviet Union, all secretly, right? That was the whole idea. This project was called Project Iceworm, but there was another project called Camp Sentry that had to be done first. This is the top secret, sketchy stuff. Can't just hit the road with a few shovels, you gotta make sure it's livable first. Camp Sentry was a network of underground tunnels and places for workers to hang out, like a kitchen, a hall, supply rooms, communication center, all stuff like that. It was a supply camp. You know, whatever you imagine, it was that. There was also a nuclear power plant. That's the most important part, to keep everything active, right? This was kept from the Danish government for 7 years. A secret nuclear power plant for 7 years. Yeah, we don't like those. But in 1966, the project was canceled because of shifting ice. Or at least that's what they say. No, it's definitely shifting ice. The whole place is melted by now.
Coming in at number 7 is Angelina Jolie. From what I have come to understand about the conspiracy race of the shape-shifting reptiles that walk the earth with us, is that more often than not, it is the eyes that give them away. Maybe their eyes are the hardest to control shape-shifting wise? I'm not totally sure, to be honest, but either way, there are definitely some strange videos out there with some weird things going on in the eyeball region. One of these videos is of A-lister Angelina Jolie. In this particular interview, you can see she's blinking her eyes a ton, which you might not think much of, but when you zoom in really tight and slow down the footage, you can see that there is a half a millisecond where it looks like her pupils elongate into slits before snapping right back into normal. My question is, does the blinking have anything to do with the trying to control their eyes from changing? Again, I have no clue what's true and have no facts to back that up, but the video is for sure a little strange. Next up at number 6 is Shakira. Once again, another pop princess with the voice of an angel has been accused of being one of the evil lizard people sent to destroy the planet. The clip that caused the uproar is from an interview a few years ago where, yep, you guessed it, her eyes slightly changed shape for a millisecond. For starters, her eyes are already quite dark, so it's a little hard to tell at first, but when the video gets slowed down and you zoom in, I will admit I can kind of see where people are going with the whole eyes changing thing. There is a moment where it does kind of look like her pupils shift into a thinner shape, and dare I say the iris kind of goes more coppery? Is that a sign? I have no idea. Truth be told, it might not be quite as obvious as some of the other ones on the list, but nonetheless, there are many out there that insist she is among the shapeshifters. Apparently, it's not just her hips that don't lie, but her eyes too. Coming in at number 5 is Lady Gaga. Okay, let me make one thing very clear. I'm a huge fan of Lady Gaga. Like, huge. I think she's an amazing artist and just a super badass person. All of that being said, I am fully aware that many people think she's a total weirdo, and like, if lizard people did turn out to be real, I could see why people would suspect Gaga to be one. I mean, if anything, what is more camp than being a shape-shifting reptile masquerading as a human, right? The main clip that brought Gaga into the suspect list of shapeshifters was from a live interview several years back, and just like almost every alleged lizard person, the clues were in her eyes. Now, first off, her eye makeup, gorgeous, but if you peer a little deeper into those eyes, you might notice something kinda looks off. She looks down for a second, blinks her eyes, and then just ever so slightly you can see that it looks like her pupils change shape and get slightly thinner for a second. Then boom, back to normal. Also, she did once say in an interview that she has always loved to shapeshift. I mean, she was talking about her hair and makeup, but was it a clue? Is this solid proof she's a lizard person from the constellation of Draco? I guess it depends on who you ask. Next up at number 4 is Isaiah Carey. Several years back in 1995, there was a reporter for NBC who became an overnight sensation after a hilarious video of him swallowing a grasshopper aired during a live broadcast. People kind of fell in love with him because he had such a huge reaction and totally switched up his entire demeanor after he accidentally swallowed the bug. However, not too long after, some people noticed something was a little off about the video, and some even started to wonder if swallowing the bug was an accident at all. What's strange about this video is that if you pay close enough attention, kinda looks like his tongue is actually aiming for the bug, just like a frog reaching for a fly. Not to mention, he has quite a big tongue compared to most people, and it kinda looks a little pointy. Either way, after he swallows the bug, he immediately turns away from the camera, and some have suggested this is to hide any further evidence that he was actively shapeshifting at the time. But also, I would probably turn away from a camera if a bug flew into my mouth without warning too. I don't know, man. Either way, the video is hilarious, so let me know what you think. Evil reptile or funny human? Coming in at number 3 is a mysterious creature. So this video is definitely one of the weirder ones on this list, cause like actually what the heck is happening? Inside what appears to be some sort of cave, a pair of glowing orb eyeball things peek out from behind the wall, but when whoever is actually holding the camera advances on them, they quickly retreat back behind the wall. Like, not gonna lie, it's kind of creepy. The creature then continues to peek out to see if the cameraman is gone before stepping out completely, showing its unnerving form, and then suddenly bolting away deeper into the cave, never to be seen again. Now, the real question, of course, what is it? Is it a shapeshifter, a weird alien, some other weird thing we have never heard of or seen before? I mean, all I know is I would not want to see that alone in a dark cave by myself. I just have a bad feeling it would kill me and eat my flesh. I'm just saying. Coming in at number 2, a security guard. It goes without saying that presidents are not going to really go anywhere without their security guards. But what do we really know about their security? And if there is reason to believe that politicians themselves are a part of the alien lizard race, then wouldn't it make sense that their protection would be too? Well, speaking of, of, back in 2012, during a speech made by President Obama, footage of the audience captured a peculiar-looking security guard in the crowd. At first glance, you might think it's just like a pale, bald dude standing there, but when they pan to the side, it straight up looks like he has no ears. I mean, what is going on here? It's giving Voldemort, if you ask me. Even weirder is when the video zooms in. If you really pay attention, it kind of looks like his head is pulsating, which, truth be told, I have no clue what that could be about, but lots of people have come forward saying it's definitely footage of him shape-shifting right before our eyes. I mean, would that mean that everyone in the CIA is a lizard person, or just a select few? I want to know how it's decided what people get taken over by the alien lizard overlords. What is their system is all. I'm just wondering. And last up today in our #1 spot is Timothy Geithner. As I mentioned, it's not just A-list movie star celebs that have been accused of being a part of the lizard race taking over mankind. Among some of the most accused are politicians and even the staff that work under them. Former Secretary of the Treasury under President Obama's presidency is among one of those that some have come to believe is a dangerous lizard person hiding behind the face of a human man. The clip that raised some eyebrows and added him into the long list of potential involved personnel came from some kind of speech, and it definitely is very odd. Unlike most of the others on this list, it wasn't his eyes that had people questioning him, but the skin surrounding them. For a moment in the video, it looks like Timothy shifts into his reptile form, and the scales begin to show through the skin around his eyes, until suddenly he touches his face and it magically disappears. Like, could this be faked? I mean, of course it could, it's the internet. But like, was it? Or is it just a really super creepy video proving an alien race of lizard people? You tell me, man.
Starting us off at number 10 is the Madonna with St. John. Dating back to the 15th century, this iconic painting is arguably one of the most debated depictions of alien life on Earth. Likely painted by Domenico Galileo. I mean, there is debate there too, but that's another story. However, as you can see, it depicts the Madonna with baby Jesus and St. John. However, if you zoom into the top right corner, you'll notice something very strange. There is an unnamed man shielding his eyes from what looks like a bright light in the sky, and beside him is a dog staring up at the same shining object. The object appears to be strangely similar to most modern depictions of a UFO, painted as a dark oval with light rays shooting out from every angle, and has definitely been the subject of much debate among alien believers and non-believers for decades. Now, it wasn't unusual for the time to paint angels or other celestial beings brightly shining down on us from the sky, but as this specific painting appears to have no such addition to the light and is simply a strangely specific flying saucer, it has led many to believe that the painter was depicting a real-life alien sighting. And truth be told, it wasn't the first time such things showed up in artwork, and it is also not the last. Could it really be a UFO? I don't know, you tell me. Coming in at number 9, coins. During a house renovation in Egypt, a group of workers say that they found 2 coins that had very unusual portraits on them. The first they found resembles the head and shoulders of an alien, while the other looks more like it depicts an alien spaceship landing, and they immediately freaked out. Plus, one of them apparently had the words opportunus adest carved on the back, which is Latin for there is an opportunity, which definitely comes across a little spooky. I won't lie, there's a lot of debate around the validity of these coins. As many have pointed out, the coins could have easily been manipulated by believers, but it has been countered by the fact that either way, there's no actual concrete proof that they don't come from aliens. I mean, I have some questions. Would aliens even use currency like us, let alone physical currency? I honestly have no clue, but I mean, if I came across these coins, I too might be just as suspicious about their origin. Coming in at number 8, the Second Punic War sightings. During the Second Punic War, which occurred in ancient Rome between 218 and 201 BC, there were apparently many sightings of strange sky phenomenon that today believers claim were aliens coming down to Earth. These alleged sightings were found in the Annales Maximi, which is essentially a historical record kept by the chief high priest during the Roman Republic, and in it is the tale of a day in 218 BC where ships that apparently gleamed in the sky came out of clouds and stayed floating in the sky. And I mean, I don't blame anyone for jumping to an alien conclusion on that one. Then, 2 years later, in 216 BC, a similar sighting was documented where large, gleaming round shields allegedly traveled through the air. Conspiracy theorists have clung on to these writings, pointing out how both descriptions can easily be imagined as the common UFO described in our modern era. Plus, this war was not the only one in history to claim such things happening in the sky. I mean, just like everything else on this list, will we ever know if the writings in the historical record really were an alien sighting? Probably not, unless we can figure out a time traveling situation, but it is a little suspicious, I would say.
Number 7. Leaked voters. Back in December 2015, personal information from 191 million voters was leaked to the public online. It happened very fast. This feels like yesterday. I remember this happening online. I was actually quite worried about it. Researcher Chris Vickery found this data while conducting a security investigation. See, Forbes had described Vickery as, well, dare I say, a good hacker, for lack of a better word. They're called white hat hackers. They find weak spots in security without sabotaging or exploiting them. You know, they're not villains. They're just like, oh, check this file, gotcha. They're nice, that's key. We need that. That's the difference. 79% of those eligible to vote were the victims in this leak. All their names, addresses, birth date, phone numbers, emails, even photos, you name it. Things you don't want people knowing, let alone third parties online. It's now out there. We're still unsure who was behind this entire leak, so that's comforting to go to sleep to, knowing. CSO Online and databreaches.net suggest that the information more than likely came from a software provider called Nation Builder. But CEO Jim Gilliam announced that that was not the case and they did not create the database. He said, nope, false. Although he conceded that it is still possible that some of the information that it contains may have come from data that they make available for free to campaigns. So a third party took what they could and really ran with it. It wasn't them, it was just their weak security. Nice, we love that. Just my photo, just in someone's Google Doc. I'm like, awesome. I don't want anything out there. I don't want my Google search history out there. That sounds suspicious. Number 6, the Space Cube. In honor of Jordan Peele's new space movie coming out called Nope, we have to include some alien cover-ups in this government list. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking drone, hopefully drone, was spotted over Missouri, and then only a couple hours later it was seen again 700 miles away. That's a pretty far distance. That's a fast travel time. What's your secret? 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, when this caught his attention. It was a sunny day, so the light reflected off the cube and it caught his eye. But then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnston, he saw the same exact thing in the sky. He saw it while he was driving home. The light and the reflection, same thing, caught his eye. At first I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were odd, he said. Well, it sounds like whatever this thing is, military aircraft, drone, whatever the case, it's pretty fast. Maybe they're filming Top Gun 3, who knows? No spoilers. Number 5, Surtsey Island. Some islands are forbidden, like Heard Island. They're home to animals and wildlife that the government refuses to let humans be part of, which is sketchy in its own way. A lot of Jurassic Park vibes over there. But when it comes to Surtsey Island near Iceland, again, always Iceland, hiding secret government projects, well, Surtsey Island is a brand new island. We love it. Literally, this island formed from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, so scientists are using this fresh face of Earth to study what it looks like to not have humans in the picture for a change. Yeah, we have seed vaults, a forbidden island. These projects make people uneasy, hence why the government tries to keep them low-key. That is until I come out and then loudly announce it, and then tell you to hit that like button. Awesome. Number 4, WikiLeaks war logs. Companies have to live somewhere, right? We're a film studio in Toronto, we're a place. We're not just a bunker, right? We're like an establishment. There's windows, we have a fridge, lots of coffee. We're okay. But where do places like WikiLeaks work? It's probably a sketchy establishment. It's probably nothing like Google, you know what I'm saying? Not a lot of beanbag chairs going on at WikiLeaks. Probably just one chair that everyone shares. Just one guy. It's literally just one guy. Today, it's a facility owned by Swedish internet provider Bahnhof. This is where they keep servers for WikiLeaks. Julian Assange was the front runner for this whole operation. So literally, like I said, it was one guy. His hard drive is stored in this bunker behind a 2-foot steel door accompanied by numerous backup generators. So you're not getting in, pal. In October 2010, WikiLeaks actually published Army field reports from 2004. It's now one of the biggest leaks in US history. This report confirmed that there were over 66,000 civilian deaths in the Iraqi war logs out of the 109,000 in total. This leak also suggested that some American troops were classifying civilians as enemies in their statistics. Yeah, which is not great. That's borderline That's a big leak. These numbers were from 2004 to 2009 alone. Yeah, it's hard stuff. Number 3, military weapons. Getting into the alien stuff, here we go. Psycho-electronic weapons. Yeah, apparently we're in a DC comic now. We have ice darts, ice rays. What's going on here? The first time Curtis Waltman heard of these military psycho-electronic weapons was when he received documents via Yahoo. Of all the places to get documents, you're like, oh, this is 10 years old. Originally, he had filed a Freedom of Information Act request to Washington State Fusion Center. He was trying to find out more on the clashes between Antifa and the far right. But instead he got a response and it was all about experimental weapons. He's like, this is not what I asked for. What is this? Open. The guy gets a zip file back in return and it's called EM Effects on Human Body. How do you not open that, right? And that's exactly what he did. He opened this file because, of course, and in it he saw diagrams on these weapons and the effects that they have on people. Muscle quaking, body pain, just shivering, just your body shuts down. It's horrible. One of the effects allowed users to control their dreams. So it's not all bad, it's just kind of not right, unethical. This was clearly sent by mistake. Nobody should ever know about any of these weapons, these super dream weapons. I don't even know what's going on there. The only emails I get are from student loans. Those ones are not a mistake. Those ones I will keep deleting. Number 2, inner armor. Not to be confused with your inner ninja. It's also pretty mighty. We've all wanted to be a superhero at some point, okay? I'm always late. I would love super speed. Any day, that'd be great. Well, DARPA's Inner Armor project almost made a dream come true. It was the Pentagon's way of creating super soldiers. Yeah, like Iron Man, they were literally working on this. Scientists use animals as a reference for these new abilities, literally like from a Marvel movie. They're studying the DNA of the stellar sea lion because it can reduce blood flow away from organs if need be, in order to reduce oxygen demand. So now we're studying that to try and make, I don't know, people like Atlanteans? Where are we going here? That would be sweet. Just Aquaman with a tactical vest and a spear. Okay, that's sure. Dr. Michael Callahan, who is in charge of running the operation, he says the goal was to make soldiers kill-proof against disease, chemical weapons, radioactive weapons, harsh weather conditions, you name it, all that good stuff. Pretty much invincible. Now, this was back in 2007, and of course in 2014, Barack Obama announced that the United States was still building Iron Man. So maybe they're close. Maybe they haven't done it yet. Who knows? Honestly, I'm seeing videos every day of like these guys on hoverboards whipping down New York. We're so close to the Green Goblin in real life. We're or like the water peer guy, he like uses the water to float. That's like 2 villains. It's 2 villains right there in real life. And finally, number 1, MK Ultra. We have to finish with a mind control project. It's the only way, of course. MK Ultra was a secret CIA project that lasted from 1953 to 1973. It's a long time. They ran hundreds of experiments to US citizens. They gave them illicit substances and other narcotics, just horrible stuff, all in attempts to crack mind control, or as they call it, information gathering. Mind control. It's definitely mind control. In the 50s and 60s, around the Cold War, the United States believed that the Soviets, Chinese, and or North Korean agents were all using mind control in the war. I mean, how else could you explain brainwashed prisoners of war in Korea, right? Nothing to do with what they're doing to them. Sure. The program had subjects take LSD, hallucinogens, paralytics, electric shock therapy, horrible stuff, just being put through the absolute worst, all in places like universities or hospitals or even prisons, right? You have no idea this stuff's happening. The happenings of these projects weren't fully known to the public until years after it ended, but the agency destroyed most MK documents back in 1973 when the whistle was blown, so we think we know, but in reality, we only know little to what happened during MK Ultra.
Number 10. Antonio Villas-Boas. On October 16th, 1957, at night, Antonio Villas-Boas was plowing fields when he saw what he described as a red star in the night sky that approached him, growing in size. The craft began descending to land on the field, and he decided to leave. Smart choice. He first attempted to leave the scene on his tractor, but its lights and engine died, so he decided to continue on foot. However, he was seized by a 5-foot-tall humanoid who was wearing gray coveralls and a helmet. Its eyes were small and blue, and instead of speech, it made noises like barks or yelps. 3 similar beings then joined and they dragged him to inside their craft. Once inside the craft, Antonio said he was stripped of his clothes and covered from head to toe with a strange gel. He was then led into a large semicircular room through a doorway that had strange red symbols written all over it. They then took blood from him and took him to a third room where some kind of gas was pumped into the room, which made him violently ill. Shortly after this, Antonio was joined in the room by another humanoid. This one, however, was female, very attractive, and naked. So the two had sexual intercourse. Antonio was then given back his clothing and taken on a tour of the ship by the humanoids. He was then escorted off the ship and watched as it took off, glowing brightly. When he returned home, he had discovered that 4 hours had passed. Wow. Number 9. Barney and Betty Hill. The UFO sighting happened about 10:30 p.m. September 19th, 1961. Barney and Betty were driving, and Betty saw a bright point of light in the sky, and they stopped to take a look. Through binoculars, Barney saw what he reasoned was a commercial airliner, but soon changed his mind because without looking as if it had turned, the craft rapidly descended in his direction. They quickly returned to the car, and the couple watched as silent, illuminated craft moved erratically and bounced back and forth in the night sky. The object rapidly descended towards their vehicle, causing Barney to stop in the middle of the highway. The huge silent craft hovered about 80 to 100 feet above their car. Using the binoculars, Barney claimed to have seen 8 to 11 humanoid figures who were peering out of the craft's windows, seemingly to look at him. One figure continued to look at Barney and communicated a message telling him to stay where you are and looking. Barney said they were wearing glossy black uniforms and black caps. He drove away and they heard a rhythmic series of beeping or buzzing sounds. The car vibrated and a tingling sensation passed through their bodies, and they experienced the onset of an altered state of consciousness that left their mind dulled. A second series of beeping or buzzing sounds returned the couple to full consciousness. They found that they had traveled nearly 35 miles or 56 kilometers, but had only vague, spotty memories of this section of the road. Number 8. Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker. The Pascagoula abduction was a UFO sighting and alien abduction in 1973, which Charles Hickson and Calvin Parker claimed they were abducted by aliens while fishing near Pascagoula, Mississippi. On the evening of October 11th, 1973, 42-year-old Charles Hickson and 19-year-old Calvin Parker told the Jackson County, Mississippi Sheriff's Office they were fishing off a pier. They heard a whirling/whizzing sound, saw 2 flashing blue lights, observed an oval-shaped object 30 to 40 feet across and 8 to 10 feet high. They claimed that they were conscious but paralyzed while 3 creatures with robotic slit mouths and crab-like pincers took them aboard the object and subjected them to an examination. Coming in at number 7, Egyptian hieroglyphs. There's a lot of debate around alien involvement in ancient Egypt, and aside from the eternal debate of if aliens helped build the pyramids, hieroglyphs depict just about the most suspicious signs of extraterrestrial help. Now, I'll be the first to say that I don't think all hieroglyphs point towards ancient alien invasion, but that doesn't mean that there aren't a few that raise an eyebrow. One in particular is a hieroglyph appearing to show the Egyptians in possession of electricity, which, if that were true, feels like a surefire sign that they were not alone down here. The tableau depicts what appears to be people holding an electric lamp or maybe a light bulb, and believers have not wasted any time adding this to their Rolodex of reasons. And it's not just electricity that ancient Egyptians may have possessed, but other hieroglyphs seem to portray other forms of advanced technology that, in theory, they would have no way of knowing about. Hieroglyphs with a spooky resemblance to helicopters or planes have been found and gone viral, only adding to the mystery of how on earth this could have been something they would possibly know about. Could it be that aliens came down and gave them knowledge to advance their technology? Could the alleged airplane drawings be a UFO they saw in the sky? Conspiracy theorists say absolutely. Coming in at number 6, Dagu. Not every sign of alien life has to do with a UFO sighting. Sometimes the signs are a bit more subtle. Dating back roughly to between the years of 14,000 and 400 BC, ancient Japan was known for crafting small human-like statues out of clay called Dagu. These statues usually measure between 4 to 12 inches, and while the exact reason for their construction remains under speculation, there are 2 main theories. The first is that Dagu were created as part of an ancient healing and fertility ritual, which could very well be true. However, the second one is a little more intriguing as it involves aliens. Now, if you take a look at these statues, they don't just look like a normal human statue. They have a strange, bulbous sort of look to them with large beanie baby eyes and kind of appear to be wearing what some have described as a stylized spacesuit. That, along with the helmeted head, has created a ton of speculation around if they were in fact modeled after aliens aliens who visited ancient Japan and made contact with its inhabitants. I suppose we might never know for sure, but it's definitely an interesting theory. Coming in at number 5, Wandjina. For a long time, a lot of indigenous culture was passed down orally through stories. One of these such stories from Australian Aboriginal mythology talks about spirits named the Wandjina, and as they tell it, the Wandjina came down from the sky and created the earth as well as all of its inhabitants. Then, when the spirit found the place they would die, they painted their image on cave walls and entered a nearby watering hole. These paintings were then refreshed by indigenous people as a method of generating their life force. But what is intriguing about this tale in particular is that these spirits are depicted all over in the form of ancient rock paintings and appear to date back about 4,000 years. Plus, around the heads of the Wandjina are lines or blocks of color seemingly depicting lightning coming out of their helmets, which I mean is definitely a little suspicious. And many believers have been quick to point out the acute resemblance to the description of greys given by alleged alien abductees. If you don't know, greys are pretty much the classic depiction of an alien and are thought to be one of the extraterrestrial races, with UFOologists claiming they make up about 40% of reported abductions and sightings in the US. But could greys have come down, created life on Earth, and then disappeared into the night? I mean, maybe. Who knows? Coming in at number 4, a flaming shield. Similarly to the Roman historical report, other cultures too recorded significant happenings, and the Annales Lauricesnis Maiores, which recorded much of history between 680 AD and 829 AD in what is now modern-day Germany, is definitely filled with some mysterious and interesting stories. One tale in particular took place during the time where battalions of Saxon soldiers were attacking, and it details as the attack progressed, suddenly a bizarre object appeared in the skies overhead. The potential UFO was described as the likeness of 2 large flaming shields, reddish in color and appearing as though it was floating in the skies above them. Apparently the object was so frightening that the advancing Saxon army abandoned the fight and retreated back to safety, something that would have been incredibly unusual for them. Now, the only hole to poke in this is that the author is unknown, but it is widely accepted that writers of the time would record events as they happened, and that these stories would be compiled at a later date into the finished work. So just because we don't know who wrote it doesn't mean we don't know for sure it didn't happen. Coming in at number 3, lizard people. One of the wildest conspiracies out there is the belief that there is a race of half human, half lizard people that are taking over the world. Now, I will admit, this one is a little trickier for me to get behind for several reasons. However, after finding out about this piece of the puzzle, I am definitely a little curious. Although the conspiracy wasn't popularized until the 1990s, in the beginning of the 20th century, archaeologist Harry Reginald Hall made an unsettling discovery that definitely brought up a lot of questions. The archaeological site in question is referred to as Tal al-Ubaid and has served as a gold mine for ancient artifacts. However, by far, the strangest uncovered artifacts have to be the multiple series of lizard humanoid statues found by Harry in 1919. From what archaeologists can deduce, they don't appear to represent gods as they aren't depicted in ceremonious poses, and so it has led many to believe they could be early depictions of the race of lizard people. I mean, I won't lie, these little statues are super creepy, and maybe one of the only times the lizard people theory has got me feeling a little suspicious. I don't know, do you think these figurines really could be proof of the evil lizard race invading the planet? Coming in at number 2, an alien mummy? Mummies are everywhere in Egypt, so while they are definitely interesting, they rarely cause any kind of huge excitement in the archaeological community, unless it's a particularly special one. Well, as I'm sure you've put together at this point, a few years ago, Dr. Victor Lubeck, who was a retired professor from the University of Pennsylvania, uncovered a strange mummy that made him question what he was seeing. Discovered in a small pyramid near Senusret II's pyramid was the mummy of a small, unidentified creature with seemingly no resemblance to that of a human body or known animal. To make things even more strange, buried along with the humanoid mummy were unusual objects Victor was unable to identify. What was clear was that whatever this was mummified with great respect and care, and an inscription was found on the tomb that roughly translates to star or sent from heaven. The running conspiracy theory is that it was an alien who was involved in some way with advising the pharaoh Senusret II, which would explain his royal treatment and careful mummification. I mean, it's definitely unsettling and absolutely an unusual find, but is it an alien? I mean, I guess it could be. And last up today on our number 1 spot, the Sumerian civilization. The ancient Sumerians were a group of people that suddenly became established in Mesopotamia circa 2900 BCE. No one is quite sure where they came from originally, but there is a general conspiracy that is well documented that their origins were not from planet Earth. According to a series of ancient texts, the Sumerians were created by an alien race called the Anunnaki, who came to Earth after their planet Nibiru collided with another planet in the solar system. The aliens found themselves in a short supply of gold and saw that Earth was in high supply, so they landed here and supposedly created a new species that was half alien, half human to mine the gold for them. Now, it does sound a little crazy, but the Sumerians did have advanced scientific, agricultural, and technological knowledge, as well as an acute understanding of the solar system, which was highly advanced at their time. Researchers have recorded clay pot batteries that still contained electrodes, a flyable model airplane, as well as an unexplainable capability to cut large stones with exact precision. Not to mention, similarly to the Egyptians, Sumerians seemed familiar and depicted drawings of rockets, airplanes, and helicopters on certain artifacts from their time too. And if that didn't make you even just a bit curious, they have also discovered mitochondrial DNA evidence linked to a woman in Africa dating more than 100,000 years ago near a gold mine. While of course we might never know for sure, the legend of the Anunnaki has made even some of the biggest skeptics question the reality of aliens.
The first image is a screen grab from a video filmed by a US Marine officer on the 20th of April in 2021 on a military base in 29 Palms, California. After the release of the photograph, multiple Marines came forward to confirm the existence of an aircraft, saying that while the photo showcases only the triangle-shaped formation of bright lights, in person the men were able to make out the black body of the aircraft as well. The unidentified flying object is said to have hovered for 10 minutes in the air before it suddenly vanished without any trace. The men were able to rule out flares for being the cause of the mysterious lights, but were never able to figure out exactly what they saw that night. However, it appears the footage has not been taken lightly, as the Pentagon has started an investigation into just what exactly was seen on the night of April 20th of 2021 in the skies above the 29 Palms military base. Next up, we have a series of photographs taken by cosmonaut Ivan Vanger in August of 2020 whilst aboard the International Space Station that appears to depict 5 unidentified flying objects flying at the same speed while maintaining the same distance between each other as well as their surroundings, moving in a straight line just above the Earth's curved horizon visible in the night sky. Vanguard, both surprised and curious, took to Twitter, now named X, to share the footage in hopes of getting some clarity as to exactly what he was looking at. In an exciting unfolding of events, his tweet was picked up by the Russian space agency Roscosmos, and a spokesperson revealed that experts were in fact studying the video in an attempt to determine what exactly Vanguard had managed to capture. Did you guys know that Japan was a major hotbed for UFO activity? Because I didn't. But apparently the Pentagon does? In fact, UFO sightings are so common in Japan that its military has reportedly ordered all pilots to disclose any and all identified flying objects directly to the Japanese government. Not only that, but Japanese self-defense forces have also undergone extensive training in relation to UFO sighting protocol. To date, 6 alleged encounters between pilots and UFOs have been reported to the Japanese government, one of which was recorded, and depicts 10 white circular balls flying through the skies of Osaka in Japan. While the government has yet to publicly comment on any of the incidents, the update of self-defense protocol alone is pretty telling. The next image was shared by a pretty reputable source, National Geographic. The image was captured by Sergio Loaiza on September 4th of 1971 during an aerial survey of Lake Kote. Everything Everything seemed pretty normal until the photos were taken back to Loise's development lab, where he noticed something very strange. A metallic flying aircraft, estimated to have a diameter of 160 feet, was located in the corner of one of the photographs. When he presented the photos to his superiors at the National Geographic Institute, they shut him down quick, forbidding Sergio as well as his colleagues from sharing any information of what they had seen that day. In 1979, however, the photograph was leaked, and the object that appeared in the image was officially classified as an unidentified flying object. In 2021, the existence of the object was again confirmed after the original copy of the photograph was scanned, and it was revealed that the UFO's presence was more than just a scratch on the lens or a piece of dust in the wind. So what do you think it was? Let us know in the comments. Next up, we have footage that comes to us straight from the declassifieds. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the video that the government quite literally copped to the fact that they have been hiding the existence of UFOs for years? Well, they did, and they came with receipts. On the 15th of January in 2023, while surveilling an MQ-9 Reaper aircraft, an unidentified aerial presence was captured moving at speeds unreachable by any of Earth's modern-day technological advances. Not only this, but as the object whizzed through the field of view of the camera lens, it appeared to leave behind an atmospheric wake before disappearing completely into the sky. Guys, if you have any, please leave your UFO and alien stories in the comments. I would love to hear about your experiences with any of these kind of things.
Number 7. Demi Lovato. Yes, that Demi Lovato, the singer, songwriter, and actress. Demi claims they were abducted by 3 space aliens and taken to a pink and purple planet. Demi appeared on the Kelly Clarkson show and said, "I woke up in my room and there were 3 beings. They asked, 'Do you want to see your planet?' I whooshed out of the room, I hovered before our planet, then whooshed to this pink and purple planet." Now, some people are skeptical she made this up to promote her limited series streaming on Peacock, Unidentified with Demi Lovato, but if it is true, what an experience. Number 6. Audrey and Debbie Hewins. Twins Audrey and Debbie Hewins said they were abducted by aliens. "I was probably about 5 years old or so," said Audrey, "and bright blue light would come into the room and the door would open and there would be like a foggy kind of misty blue light just shining through the whole house. And these 2 figures would come in. We have been up in crafts and seen our house from above. They are very good at mind erasing or whatever you want to call it. They'll leave you with bits and pieces of things you can remember." Debbie added, "I remember one time being on a spaceship and standing there on the spaceship and the floor and the walls disappeared. They started doing all kinds of experiments on us when we were 12. She was initially hesitant to come forward, and Audrey claimed that after a non-human entity saved her from drowning in the ocean, she was inspired to dedicate her life to openly discussing her alien abduction experiences." Number 5. Thomas Reed. On September 1st, 1969, Thomas Reed and his family in Berkshire County, Massachusetts, saw a UFO. In the car with his mother, brother, and grandmother that night, the family noticed a group of glowing orbs dash out the roadside trees. "It came to a stop off the right side of the road," Thomas said. "Eventually, everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. It was just dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs and it got really loud and that was it. Then the family suddenly found itself back in the car. But they had inexplicably lost 2 hours of memory. Stranger still, Reed's mother and grandmother had somehow switched car seats. He said over time the family regained some memory of the incident, including having been to a hangar-like facility with other people. We encountered something, it was definitely not of this world. The hangar thing we were in was huge, it was larger than a football field. The hallway we had seen was circular with a wide configuration, almost to control the flow of traffic, and this one room had a bowed-in wall that was rounded." Number 4. Whitley Strieber. Whitley Strieber has written fiction for more than 40 years, and he said his writing streak was interrupted one night in the late 80s by an alien abduction in upstate New York. The alleged incident occurred on the night of December 26, 1985, as Whitley slept alone in his cabin in the woods. Woken by a strange noise, he saw a small, non-human entity approaching his bed. Suddenly, it was morning. According to him, beings that he has since referred to as visitors entered his home and abducted him. He also detailed another alien encounter that he claims took place in Toronto. Asleep in his Delta Chelsea hotel room in the middle of the night on June 6, 1998, Whitley claimed to have been visited by another mysterious stranger. I got up to open the door, thinking it was a room service waiter. It was not. It was a man described as 5'1.5 feet tall, older looking, like someone in his 70s. He wore dark colored clothing, a turtleneck, and charcoal slacks. He claimed the visitor stood motionless by his window for nearly an hour, expounding on the dangers of creating an intelligence more evolved than its creator. He said it was the most extraordinary conversation I have ever had in my entire life. Number 3. Frederick Valentich. On October 21st, 1978, Australian pilot Frederick Valentich disappeared into thin air. At 7:06 p.m. while at 4,500 feet, after departing, he reported that an unidentified craft was following him. Melbourne Flight Service insisted that there was no traffic near him, but the pilot was adamant. He explained that it had 4 bright lights and suddenly passed 1,000 feet above him at remarkable speed. For 5 straight minutes, Frederick described its movements and shiny metallic exterior. Suddenly, he experienced engine trouble and said that the aircraft was hovering and that it's not an aircraft. Then they never heard from him again. The last sound radio officials heard was a metallic scraping sound. Authorities presumed he had crashed, but a later search of the area yielded nothing. In 2014, a UFO action group in Victoria alleged that a farmer observed a UFO nearly 90 feet in length hovering above his farm the morning following Frederick's disappearance. The farmer also claimed that the pilot's plane was stuck to the UFO, leaking oil. While the farmer said he scratched the airplane's registration number on his tractor, he never came forward. Ultimately, only a few possibilities regarding the disappearance of Frederick Valentich exist: that he crashed and his remains were never recovered, that he purposely disappeared, or, of course, that he was abducted by aliens. Number 2. Terrell Copeland. The Virgin pilot Terrell Copeland claimed that he was abducted by aliens, particularly because he was a Marine. Terrell claimed that his first experience with aliens occurred in 2007 when he captured footage of what he believed to be a UFO on his cell phone from his apartment in Suffolk, Virginia. It was an orb of light, just a big ball of light. It wasn't moving, one was solid white, the other was directly across the street from it, up 300 feet above ground, and was changing colors very rapidly, he said. He alleged that it wasn't until after he published the footage online that things truly became strange. I woke up from a nap by the sound of someone trying to enter my apartment, and I said, "Who is it?" There was no answer. You can see the doorknob moving and scratching at the door. I keep a firearm, it was on my table, and my thought was to get up and check. Despite the urge to get up, Terrell was paralyzed and only able to move his eyes. Suddenly, he heard a voice through the door tell him, "You don't need that weapon. We won't harm." He then began to experience missing hours as well. He was incapable of accounting for waking hours during a span of 2 nights. I was in a room and I saw a woman who did not have a complete human features. She had the typical black eyes that you hear about. She had an elongated skull, and that startled me. And the next memory I have is me standing on my balcony waving at this cylinder-shaped ship, he said. And coming in at number 1 is Travis Walton. On November 5th, 1975, Travis Walton was abducted by aliens and didn't return for 5 whole days. Travis's abduction began after working in Sightings National Forest near Heber, Arizona. Travis and his 6-man group of vloggers were returning home when they allegedly spotted a shiny disc spanning 40 feet in diameter hovering in the sky above them. He said it was a metallic, glowing disc making some very strange sound. The closer I got to it, the more scared we all got, and they were swearing at me to get away from there, and when I got up close, it suddenly got louder and started to move. Travis then claimed that non-human beings abducted him and experimented on him until he fought them off. But as the beings poked and prodded at him on a kind of table, 5 days elapsed on Earth where Walton was officially declared missing. I became conscious in the aircraft, and I believed I was in the hospital. I was in a lot of pain, and as I became more conscious, I looked around and saw alien beings, and I just panicked. They were much smaller than me, and I think that's the reason they gave up. Once they found out they couldn't control me, they split. Later research conducted on on the site of Travis's abduction showed an unusual growth rate in the trees where the craft had allegedly hovered. The trees near the site were found to be producing wood fiber at a rate 36 times greater than they had decades before.
In our number 10 spot, we have UFO spotting in Washington. Two harbor patrolmen in the Washington state named Harold H. Dahl and Fred L. Chrisman spotted a UFO over the water of Puget Sound, Washington. It was 1947, and after this incident, they were approached by a man dressed in black that forcefully advised them to not discuss the incident further. This was one of the first sightings of the men in black. The men were described as being extremely mysterious, never looking the patrolman in the eyes. Ooh, probably to cover up their reptile eyes, am I right? In our number 9 spot, we have the Stargazer. A young man by the name of Harry lived in the country on a farm and was fascinated by the stars. He was given a telescope for Christmas one year, and he would look up at the stars and study them every night. One night, he spotted something in the sky like nothing he had ever seen before. It was a triangle, metal-looking object flying in the sky. He thought that it had to be a UFO. He ran inside to call his friend and tell him about it, and after he got off the telephone, he heard a knock on his door. He opened it to see 3 men dressed in black from head to toe. There was something a bit weird about them though. They all kind of looked alike, and their noses were almost non-existent. Before Harry could speak, they were telling him to forget what he had seen and never speak of it again. They also subtly threatened his family and his future if he spoke about it. Terrified, he vowed not to. He eventually decided to share his story online because technically he wouldn't be speaking about it. Upon years of reflection, Harry believes that he met some kind of alien. In our number 8 spot, we have the President's Men in Black. In 2012, it was discovered that President Obama of the USA had a few men in black working for him that could have very well been from another world. Footage was discovered of his security at the US-Israel Policy Conference, and they were looking rather alien-like. From the front, completely normal. From the back, we see a bald man with no ears and a pointy chin. His nose looks short and rounded, and his eyes appear to be dark and sunken in. Do you think there were possibly alien men in black guards guarding the president that day? It's definitely possible.
Next up, we have arguably the most beautiful alien assuming photograph I have ever seen. The photo was taken in 2004 by a retired Royal Air Force officer while on vacation in Sri Lanka. The sight was described as some kind of colorful giant donut in the sky with hues of oranges, pinks, purples, and whites. After its capture, the photograph was turned into the Royal Air Force Flying Dales base in North Yorkshire in England, where it became a classified document held by the Ministry of Defense. The image has since been declassified, of course, and is now available for public viewing, but there is still a lot of mystery surrounding the photo as well as the photographer, as his identity, along with any other information regarding the incident, is pretty much non-existent. I mean, come on, it's a giant glowing light in the sky. You're really telling me no one else saw this and that there's no other information out there other than the fact that the photo exists? Oh, yeah, and not only that, but it was deemed classified by the British Ministry of Defense, so I'm thinking there's something else going on here. Okay, I bet you didn't know that another major hotbed for extraterrestrial, UFO, and unidentified aerial phenomenon activity was Brazil. I mean, I did, but maybe you didn't. In fact, this kind of thing is so popular in Brazil that they have an annual day of recognition for these sightings known as the Night of the UFO, which came to be after a major event took place in 1986. On the night of May 19th, a series of unidentified flying objects were seen in the skies of Brazil, and even more non-visual objects were detected via radar across the skies of 4 Brazilian states. Of course, at this time, any and all knowledge the government had on the event was extremely classified. In May of 2012, however, Brazil's Freedom of Information Act went into place, after which the public demanded the release of all the documents relating to the incident. The government complied, and not only released written documents of the events, but also a series of photographs depicting predicting strange activity within the skies above Brazil. Although the images of what appeared to be nothing more than squiggles and clouds of smoke didn't provide much clarity, a statement made by the Minister of Aeronautics did. He said, "This command is of the opinion that the phenomena are solid and reflect, in a certain way, intelligence, due to the ability to follow and maintain a distance from observers, as well as to fly information." After this statement was made, the Brazilian government has still not been able to confirm exactly what took place the day the night of the UFOs was born. Next, we have a photo taken in 1990 by two Scottish chefs who were working in a hotel near the area in which the photograph was taken. After a long day of work, it appears the two men had decided to take a hike in an attempt to blow off some steam. While this walk wouldn't end up being incredibly relaxing, it would be wildly exciting, as not long after the two men had set off on their journey along the Calvine Scottish countryside, they noticed something hovering above them in the sky. The object was not one that either of the men could identify, and so they pulled out their cameras in an attempt to document the 100-foot flying aircraft instead. The photos, which have been analyzed and show no signs of manipulation, capture the object being circled by a jet plane. They thought the incident was incredibly strange and even newsworthy, so the two turned the footage over to the local newspaper for publication, but the images were seized by the British Ministry of Defence and were never released. Until 32 years later, that is, by David Clark, who, unbeknownst to the ministry, had kept a photocopy of one of the original images. The identity of the two men was never revealed, nor did they ever come forward to share their story after the images had been seized by the ministry, begging the question of what exactly they saw and what exactly the government was trying to cover up. A photograph taken of an unidentified aircraft lit up by military spotlights in Los Angeles, California, is next on the list. The photograph, which documents an event so big it later became referred to as the Battle of Los Angeles or the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, was taken on February 23rd of 1942, just 2 months after the attack on Pearl Harbor. On the night the photo was taken, all of Los Angeles was under blackout, as directed by the US military. While the lights on the ground had been turned off, the sky above had been lit up by a myriad of strange objects. The military opened fire, and onlookers stood absolutely stunned as 1,400 rounds of ammunition appeared to have no effect on the unidentified flying object. Smoke filled the sky, and when it cleared, not a single craft was to be found in the sky or on the ground. Shrapnel that appeared to have ricocheted off the target resulted in the death of 5 civilians. Furthermore, 3 were killed in car accidents due to the chaos of the event, and 2 more of heart attacks due to the stress of the 2-hour-long attack. And finally, we have a handful of screen grabs from a video taken by Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich whilst flying an 18F Super Hornet fighter jet over the Pacific Ocean near San Diego during a training mission for the United States Navy. The footage, taken in November of 2004, was captured after Dietrich was asked to investigate a suspicious object that had been seen dropping from 80,000 feet down to the surface of the ocean and then vanishing. When Alex and their colleague arrived on the scene, the ocean's surface, where the object had been reported, appeared as though it was boiling. Moments after arriving to investigate, a strange, elongated white object came into view and was captured on video hovering above the water before it disappeared into the sky at an impossible speed, leaving no wake in the oceans below. While the footage has been confirmed to be authentic by the United States Department of Defense, the object itself, along with its origins, remains a mystery.
Starting us off this countdown, we have Harold Dahl. This is supposedly the real-life story that inspired the movie Men in Black. So on June 27th, 1947, Harold Dahl, his young son, and his dog went out on a conservation mission. While out on the fishing boat, they saw 6 donut-shaped aircrafts hovering in the air above them. The crafts then started dropping weird molten-type waste onto the lake. He described it as if it was raining lava or white metal. This ended up hitting his son's arm and the dog. The son was badly injured, and sadly the dog didn't survive. When this happened, Harold managed to take a picture of the aircraft. The following morning, he was visited by a man in a black suit at a local diner. The man apparently threatened Harold to delete the photo, and he was told to not talk about the incident. But this story has been retold so many times that the facts are now jumbled. Some say that it was his son that got his arm burnt on the alien lava, but in another story, it was his co-workers, so I don't even know what to think.
Coming at number 9, we have the cornfield. It should be no surprise that we are doing a list about men in black, and we got a point about a cornfield. Aliens love cornfields for whatever reason. Maybe they land in a cornfield, they scoop up a bunch of corn, then they make popcorn, and that they can eat while they watch humans freak out because they landed in a cornfield. That seems like the perfect circle of entertainment. But this point was thrown on top of Reddit by Redditor Muffins for Petey. They said that they grew up on a farm, and one night they saw something fly down from the sky and hover right above their farm. It was shaped like a rectangle and looked like it was glowing light, like a massive glowing log in the sky. Well, then this thing just vanished. Almost as fast as it came, it was gone. They must have only needed a little bit of popcorn. The next day there was a knock at the door. It was two men in black suits and they had dark glasses on. They said that they needed to inspect the farm because there was a supposed gas leak. It was very strange because mostly everything on the farm was run by solar energy. These two men had government identification but gave them very little information as to what they were going to do. They just told them that they needed to stay in their home or they were going to be arrested for endangering people. So they listened, and then these two dudes poked around for a little bit and then they were off. They never said if they found anything or fixed a gas leak. The whole thing was just very suspicious. And guys, make sure you hit that like button because it really helps us out.
In our 8th spot, we have Shane Sover. This next encounter happened fairly recently. So on October 14th, 2008, hotel manager Shane Sover had been informed by a security guard at his hotel that he had seen a UFO from the hotel. 2 weeks later, hotel staff were panicked when two strange men entered the hotel in search of Shane and the security guard. Shane, wanting to see who these men were, checked the security footage. And sure enough, two men in black suits wearing a hat could be seen wandering the hotel. The men didn't have any hair and looked fairly strange. Yeah, I'm thinking they were like aliens disguised as humans.
In our number 7 spot, we have the Fire Watch sighting. A man named Gabe was working a shift at a fire watch tower in the woods when he saw a black SUV pull up in the wee hours of the morning. A few minutes later, the sound of a firearm went off. The next thing he knew, there was a knock on his tower and two large men in black were waiting behind the door. He opened the door and they immediately questioned him, asking him to reveal what he saw. He said he saw nothing, and after a moment they appeared to believe him. They told him to never speak of this experience to anyone. Looking back, he definitely thinks he met one of the men in black. Originally, he chalked these men up to some kind of gang, but now he definitely thinks that those two men were the men in black. In our number 6 spot, we have the UFO researcher. In 1976, Dr. Herbert Hopkins, who is a UFO researcher, got a call from someone who claimed to be a rep from a New Jersey UFO organization. The man asked if Hopkins was alone and if Hopkins would be willing to share his research. Hopkins said sure and began sharing with him. Once he hung up the phone, a man was at his doorstep. He described the man as being bald, without eyebrows, wearing a neatly tailored black suit. He had red lips and pale white skin. The man took out a coin and told Hopkins to watch it. It started to develop a silver color instead of copper, and then the silver became bluish and the penny was getting quite fuzzy, out of focus, blurred, and then it was simply gone. Apparently after this incident, he was instructed to destroy all of his research. In our number 5 spot, we have the Dan Aykroyd story. This story is wild to me because I have literally had the thought, why doesn't the dad from Crossroads barely work anymore? Did Hollywood cast him out? I've literally just thought about this last week. Well, that honestly might be the case, and I certainly wonder about that after hearing about how he shared this story with people online. So 20 years ago, in 2002, 20 years ago, wow, Dan was creating a series called Out There for the Sci-Fi Channel, and it talked about UFOs, alien abductions, crop circles, and all kinds of extraterrestrial research. One day he was in the middle of doing some interviews when he went outside between 42nd and 8th Street in New York for a break, and he went on a phone call with Britney Spears, funny enough, talking to him about their new movie, when he looked out at the street and saw a long black SUV and two guys in black outside of it. One was very tall and they were just glaring at him. He turned away for a second, and when he looked back, they were gone. He has gone on record to say that he knows what he saw and there was absolutely no way that they could have turned on that street because he would have seen them. They disappeared as if they had some kind of cloaking device. He found out that his show was cancelled later that day. In our number 4 spot, we have the Niagara Hotel. A manager of a hotel in Niagara by the name of Sovar and his security guard reported seeing a triangular UFO outside their building. A group called the Aerial Phenomena Investigations Team reported the incident with the two men's consent. A few weeks later, 2 tall men in black suits came into the hotel and spoke with Sovar and the security guard. They freaked out the employees allegedly as they had identical faces, no eyebrows or eyelashes, and were very pale. These 2 men were caught on surveillance for the hotel, and that footage definitely makes me feel very nervous. A small part of me wants to go to Niagara and ask every hotel about this incident and just, find out which hotel it is. In our number 3 spot, we have the library. Apparently, a professor by the name of Peter Rojewitz claimed that he once was reading a UFO book in the library when all of a sudden a strange pale man wearing all black sat down next to him. The man suddenly began talking to the professor and asked him questions about flying saucers and his opinion on them. Peter said that he wasn't super interested in them. The man became very agitated by this. He eventually left and the professor felt super uncomfortable. Upon reflection, he is sure that he met a man in black official. In our number 2 spot, we have the disc. A man by the name of Paul Miller experienced something so crazy one day when he was coming home from a hunting trip. He looked up and saw a luminous disc in the sky. The disc landed in a field and 2 humanoids left the craft. Paul had a weapon on him, and so he fired at the beings as he ran away, and he believes that he managed to hurt one of them. As he was running away from the scene, in a blink of a moment he realized that he had lost time. It was suddenly 3 hours later than when he first saw the aircraft. He shrugged it off and went back to work as normal the next day. But when he got to work, 3 men in black suits approached him. He was informed that they had his file. He hadn't even told anyone about what he experienced, but these men said they knew all about it. They told him that it was best he forget about what happened. Yikes. In our number 1 spot, we have the photograph. A man by the name of Jim Templeton took a nice photo of his daughter holding some flowers, and when he got it developed, he discovered something else in the photo that was not there when he took it. A sort of white spaceman. How could this be? He took it to Kodak and they authenticated it, and from there, his story went public. Not too long after, he was approached by 2 government agents that called themselves Number 9 and Number 10. They demanded to see the site of where the photo was taken, and when they discovered that Templeton didn't actually see the spaceman in person, that he just showed up in the photograph, they got very angry and walked away. Not long after that, Templeton was contacted by 2 employees at a missile launch pad that was located near the site where the photo was taken, and these men claimed that they had seen 2 figures that resembled the men in the photo. Woo, so weird. Props an alien spaceman. What a wild story.
Starting us off at the number 10 spot is the late Queen Elizabeth II. So it's no secret that there are quite a lot of people out there who are not fans of the royal family. And while for some it might just be about an overall lack of likeness towards the monarchy, there are many out there whose hatred stems from a deep-seated belief that everyone in the royal family are in fact shape-shifting lizard people. This all started from some footage that was found online of the Queen where some particularly strange eyes seem to appear out of nowhere. In the video, the Queen is standing at what appears to be a game of sorts, and then all of a sudden her eyes change to look almost like some sort of crazy demon. Immediately people were freaked and jumped to the conclusion that it was because she was a shape-shifting lizard. But others blew it off as just her having bloodshot eyes. Now, listen, I don't know about you, but I've never seen a bloodshot eye that was completely black before. I'm just saying. As you can imagine, this footage did not help the royal family's rep of being from the constellation Draco and only further cemented the belief that they are all evil lizards. What do you think? Coming in at number 9 is Katy Perry. So here's the thing about lizard people. They tend to be exclusively pinned on celebrities. Now there is some reasoning behind this. It's because the shapeshifters are supposed to be evil, and so they take over the bodies of celebrities or leaders in order to be able to have the power to wreak havoc on our world. One of the celebs that people swear is a lizard is none other than Miss Teenage Dream herself, Katy Perry. The footage that brought her into this world comes from an interview she did years ago where for just a millisecond it appears like her eyes change color from a sort of blue to green, and just for a second it looks like her pupils turn into slits. Oh, I should mention that apparently a calling card of these lizard people is that they have green eyes, so her eyes supposedly changing to green was seen as proof of her real lizard self peeking through. Suspicious? You tell me. Next up at number 8 is Rihanna. I refuse to believe that Riri could be an evil reptile alien sent here to wreak havoc and cause evil, because number 1, she's like the chillest human ever, and 2, I mean, she's Rihanna, so I don't want it to be true. But it looks like even the good ones aren't safe according to believers of the lizard people. The proof comes from some kinda sus footage from what looks like a live talk show or something, and even though it's a bit blurry, it does look like there's something weird going on. If you pay close attention, it does appear that her eyes turn into slits for just a millisecond before turning back to normal. I mean, should we be worried? Could she really be a lizard person? I mean, even if she was, she would easily be the most beautiful lizard person I've ever seen, so at least there's that.
Coming in number 7, we have the footage. If you ever get some hardcore evidence that aliens are real, you better put that stuff on a hard drive and beeline it to the border, because there is no way that you're going to upload that stuff without having Men in Black come down on you. I grabbed this story off an Alien Encounter subreddit, and the person writing it said they for real saw a UFO fly above them and then zoom off like a laser, and they managed to get it on video. The first thing they went to do was upload it to the internet, but all of the sudden they had no signal. This was in the middle of the night and they were all alone, and then out of nowhere 2 Men in Black were standing right behind him. They had their faces covered and guns pointed at him. They demanded the phone, and as soon as he gave it to them, he passed out. He woke up in the drunk tank and was apparently being belligerent, but he hadn't drank anything that night, and his phone was still missing.
And at number 6, we have the spaceman photo. In 1964, Jim Templeton spent the day taking photos of his wife and daughter in a field. But when he got the photos developed, he saw something quite strange in the background of his daughter's photo. It appeared to be a spaceman right by her daughter. The only other people that had been there that day were some older ladies. Of course, people didn't believe the photo to be real, but an analyst at Kodak confirmed that the photo was real and hadn't been tampered with. Even creepier, after Jim's story made big news, he was visited by 2 government agents, 2 men in suits that referred to themselves as number 9 and 10. They then demanded to see where the photo was taken, and he was heavily questioned about that day. When Jim told them he never saw the figure in person, the men became angry and drove away. Pretty sus.
Coming in at number 5, we have Albert K. Bender. It turns out dedicating your life to flying saucers is nothing new. Albert K. Bender was the founder of the International Flying Saucer Bureau. This place was leading the field in investigative work when it came to finding out what the government knew about aliens. In 1955, he wrote a paper that was detailing everything the government was doing with aliens, and it was ready to be published in the Space Review. But that would change when he was visited by some Men in Black. They teleported into his room late one night and had the psychic ability to talk to him through their minds. They manipulated him to destroy his research, and that was that. He would never go on to touch anything to do with aliens after this point.
Moving on to number 4, we have Jack and Mary Robinson. Back in 1968, Jack and his wife Mary were both UFO researchers. Didn't even know that was a job, but where can I apply? But the more they researched into aliens and UFOs, the more weird stuff began to happen. One time they returned home to find that their house had been searched. All their files regarding UFOs and aliens had been tampered with. Then things started to get worse. Mary started noticing a man that would stand outside their apartment and watch them. The man was always wearing a black suit and a hat. In fact, they managed to capture a photo of him. Mary had told her friend what was happening, and the friend drove over and saw the man for herself and took a photo of him. It's so freaky.
Coming in number 3, we have the night visitors. I'm on the fence when it comes to meeting aliens. Like, of course I would want to meet aliens, but it would have to be the right setting. Like in a park or at a party or a big reveal event like they do with the latest iPhone. Steve Cook is like, now I give you the alien. But the way this next story goes wouldn't be my ideal circumstance. Reddit user Chop Stew told a story of an alien encounter that brought a man in black into his life. It all happened super fast. He woke up in the middle of the night and there were 5 tall gray beings standing around his bed. He was in a haze, then he started to panic, but before he could even speak, he was back asleep. He woke up the next morning feeling a little bit rattled. Whatever he saw last night seemed so real, but it couldn't have been. It must have been a strange dream. The next day at work, he was called into HR, but there was a new person working. This lady had just come in for the day from head office. She wanted to just talk about his personal life. They chatted for a bit and then she asked him about his dreams. He could feel the hair on the back of his neck stand up when she posed the question. He didn't give in and kept the alien sighting to himself. The next day, the regular HR person was back and he never found out who this replacement was and why they wanted to speak to him and how they knew about what had just happened to him the night before. So this time, it was a lady in black.
In our second spot, we have Dr. Herbert Hopkins. Back in the day, a man named Dr. Hopkins was working as a consultant on a UFO case in Maine. Again, I didn't know that was a job. That was until one day he received a phone call from someone claiming to be part of the UFO community. Again, didn't know that was a thing. He asked if he could visit Dr. Hopkins to discuss the case. Hopkins agreed and he was greeted by an intimidating man wearing a black suit and black tie. Apparently, this guy was extremely pale with no hair or eyebrows. As soon as the man entered Hopkins' home, his dog went berserk, just started barking at him. The man then basically interrogated Hopkins to see how much he knew. Before leaving though, he told Hopkins that there were 2 coins in his pocket, Hopkins' pocket. He then told him to reach into one of his pockets and retrieve it. He did it and then he said to hold the coin in his hand and look at it closely. Within a few seconds, the coin started to go in and out of focus before disappearing completely from his hand. He then said that the coin would never be seen on this plane again. It gets weirder. The man then asked him if he was familiar with a man named Barney Hill. Barney Hill was a man that said he was abducted by a UFO. He died from cerebral hemorrhage. When Hopkins said yes, he knew of him, the man said, Barney didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin. Basically implying that he's got the power to kill him. And honestly, he probably killed Barney. Hopkins was then told to get rid of every file he had on the UFO case. And he did as he was told. He burned every shred of evidence. Watch, now the men in black are gonna come after me and Shay for this video. Just saying.
Again, coming to the number 1 spot, we have a message from the future. Now, who knows if this is true? It's fun to believe stories like the one I'm about to tell you because it makes life a little bit more interesting. But a story I snagged online spoke of someone who started to receive messages on their phone. They were from an unknown number, but they had details about things that seemed to be random. The messages would be like, a man in a plaid shirt will buy a coffee with 2 creams and 2 sugars next to you and forget his wallet. Like, okay, but what does that mean? But then these events started happening. It was like these texts were coming from the future. So he started to respond to them, but the person would never communicate outside of these messages that were hints from the future. But why was this coming to our random writer? Well, we never found out because one day a black van pulled up next to him and 4 men in black suits jumped out and told him that he was under arrest. They put him in the van and then took him to a police station. They searched him, took his phone, he was detained for a few hours and then released and was given everything except for his phone. They said it got lost and they would send it to him when they found it, but he never got his phone back, and from there, the messages just stopped.
Starting us off at number 10 is Mothman. Now this creature has been seen around the Point Pleasant area of West Virginia, but I won't go too into depth about it because you guys can watch my West Virginia myths video if you guys want to know more about it. Self-plug, hahaha. No, I'm kidding. Either way, Point Pleasant was known to be frequented by a lot of men in black, asking people around town about the Mothman and to not speak about it. They talked to reporter Mary Hire, who later claimed the men who questioned her did not blink even once. One night in Jan of '67, Mary was working late in her office when a 4'6" tall man walked in wearing a black suit, glasses, and thick shoes that added about 2 inches to his height. He spoke in an incredibly low voice and asked for directions to Welsh, but kept edging closer and closer to her.
Again, he never blinked and picked up a ballpoint pen off her desk like he had never seen such a contraption in his life. He then grabbed it, laughed out loud quite hard, and then ran out of the building. No one saw him come in or out except Mary. Coming in at number 9 is the disappearing coin. Dr. Herbert Hopkins was a consultant on a UFO case in Maine involving a man called Barney Hill who had allegedly been abducted. One night he got a call from an activist in the UFO community asking if they could meet and discuss the case. Now Hopkins agreed to meet the man, but not even 2 minutes later there was a knock on his door. The man didn't seem like an activist. He was in a black suit and tie, he had no hair, no eyebrows, and was the palest person Hopkins had ever seen. The scariest bit about it was that Hopkins never mentioned his address, yet the man just showed up anyway, and when he did, the doctor's dog would just not stop barking at him. Guys, dogs sense evil. I also did videos on that. So many self-plugs today. The man asked him about the case and afterwards told him he had 2 coins in his pocket and told Herbert to take one out. He did that and the agent told him to watch the coin. It began to take on a silvery appearance and then started going out of focus and then fading away till it vanished completely. The agent stared at Hopkins for a while and said the coin would never be seen on Earth again, and then inquired what all he knew about Barney Hill. Freaked out, Hopkins said he thought Hill died before the abduction took place, and the agent told him he was right and that Hill didn't have a heart, much like him not having a coin. Whatever the hell that meant. Probably trying to be poetic, but I don't get it. He then advised Hopkins to destroy all information he had on the case, and Hopkins listened and burnt all of it. Afterwards, he was experiencing a lot of phone troubles, and his company said his line had been tampered with, and he immediately knew that they had tapped his line. He never saw the man again. At number 8, we have the collision. Back in 1967, Robert Richardson went for a drive during which he claimed he collided with a UFO. On impact, the spacecraft vanished completely, yet Richard managed to find a small lump of metal on the road and take it home. What happened to your car, Richard? How did you even get home? There's just some, loose ends that are just not really making sense, right? Either way, a week later, 2 men in black showed up at his doorstep asking for the piece of metal he had taken from the scene. And he hadn't told anyone about the piece of metal, so how did those random men even know about it, let alone where he lived? He then told them he had already given it to authorities for testing, and they replied saying they were going to hurt and threaten his wife, saying, if you want your wife to stay as pretty as she is, then you'd better get the metal back. He never saw them again. But also, what the hell happened with the testing? Did they find anything? So many loose ends, Richard. So many loose ends. Filling at number 7 slot is the third party. This one comes from Redditor Chronic Cyclist, who said there was this guy in England that was recruited to work for a special department of the Royal Air Force. They specialized in cleaning up after aliens had visited Earth, and one day on the job the man decided to take some photos, because Pixar didn't happen, right? He ended up getting in touch with a third party person that was into these encounters, but the photos were given to the police, supposedly the men in black, in disguise, and then they were lost. Both men involved ended up getting arrested, and the third party guy had his house suspiciously burnt down. Either way, the guy who took the photos had copies in his storage box and agreed to have them released after he died. I haven't seen these photos, so clearly the man's still alive. I don't know why I sound salty about that. Live your life. I'll wait. I'm patient. Now at number 6 is the camera footage. This was a legit camera footage of men in black in a Canadian hotel. The 2 men showed up asking questions about one of the employees. The employee claimed they had recently seen a UFO and told all their friends about it, and boom, in the next couple of days, the men in black just show up to his workplace. Thankfully, that day the employee in question wasn't at work, so they dodged a major bullet. But similar to Dr. Hopkins' case, the staff described the men as having no hair on their head or face, perhaps disguising it with a wig, and having weirdly hypnotizing eyes. The eyes are interesting because in the movie the agents use memory erasing neuralizers, but maybe in real life they just use their eyes. I don't know, it'd be a lot more convenient than carrying that thing around, that's for damn sure. The outfits were also really questionable. The black suits just fit weirdly, like they were trying so hard to be normal and fit in, but something was just very off. They looked like mafia bosses from a noir movie, if I'm honest. I saw the footage, I did. They stuck around asking the employees some more questions about conspiracies and then left. It left the staff quite shaken, and honestly, I don't blame them. Coming in at number 5 is Lev. Now this story was shared by an anonymous woman who said she was sure her dad was best friends with a Men in Black agent growing up. Now as a kid, her dad worked as an engineer and was constantly visited by this guy in a black suit, hat and glasses that went by the name Lev. He was entirely bald, which was quite a weird hair choice for the time, and his skin was suspiciously smooth and hairless. Now someone dropped the T. It wasn't laser hair removal, it wasn't waxing, it wasn't Nair hair removal cream, so I mean drop that hair care routine, sis. We need it. Help a brother out, Lev. Now, either way, Lev would be in the same outfit, rain or shine. Even on days it was absolutely boiling out, he would be wearing a suit and coat and no questions asked. He had a reputation of hanging around the engineers in the area and lived in a tiny house near a supermarket. The woman was sure her dad knew Lev was an agent or an alien of some kind, but they had some sort of alliance. At number 4 we have The Stalker. Jack Robinson and his wife Mary were both avid UFO researchers back in the day, but the deeper they got into it, the weirder their life got. They would come home and find their house rummaged through and all their UFO files disturbed and scattered. Someone kept gaining entry into their house no matter how many times they changed their locks. Sounds like you got a problem. Now Mary then started noticing a bizarre tall man in a bulky black suit and hat that would constantly stare at their apartment from the downstairs doorway. She was scared that this was the man who was breaking into their house, and so she mentioned it to her friend Tim. Tim then drove the couple there and actually took a picture of the man who was believed to be a Men in Black agent. Now my thing with this story is, if the agents really wanted the couple to stop, why didn't they just steal all their UFO files instead of just rummaging through them? Just cut to the chase. Or just burn that shit down like you did to that other guy. I'm not advocating arson, I'm just saying there are more efficient ways to get rid of things. Filling our number 3 slot is The Base. This one comes from Redditor Corothis59, who said their older brother was in the army, and one night him, his wife, and some friends went to a hill near their base to look at the moon. Romance. Who said it's dead? But while they were there, they saw a blazing blue orb pulling moves that no normal human aircraft could do, and that was a fact considering the elder brother was an expert in aircraft. The group was sat there in awe, just looking at the craft before the lights stopped and the craft just stayed hovering in the sky, almost like it was watching them watch it. It was about 10 PM now, and all of a sudden the craft lunges towards them, and next thing you know they open their eyes, it's 4 AM, and they were hundreds of miles away from the base in the middle of a random wheat field. Now they got out of it trying to gauge their tire tracks to see which way they came in, but there were no tire tracks. The car just got there like it fell out of the sky, which at this point I believe happened. Craziest shit happened on this list. A few days later, Men in Black visited the brother's wife and threatened her to not talk about anything she had seen. They then showed up at the brother's base and threatened him as well, which wasn't even possible because the base was such a controlled access intelligence area, randomers can't just walk in. But the strangest part was that no one saw them come or go. It's like they were invisible or camouflaged, which I'm sure would be very easy for aliens to accomplish. Either way, the family never saw the Men in Black again, but the wife of the brother still bursts into tears every time they're mentioned. Talk about leaving a lasting impression. Now at number 2 are the photos. Some of you may know Danny Gordon, who used to be a very famous radio personality. At the end of the 80s, Danny became obsessed with the Wythe County UFO sightings. Countless people in the county said they had seen bizarre objects in the air, and he wanted to get photographic proof. There was even one time a full school bus of kids saw UFOs going over a shopping mall as he quickly ran to take photos. And these photos were at very close range, and they proved the crafts weren't man-made and they weren't from this earth. But after he'd captured the proof, Danny's life started going downhill. He got a call from an anonymous ex-military man who warned him that his photos could cost him everything and to stop his research for his family's sake. When in doubt, emotional blackmail, apparently. A few days later, 2 Men in Black showed up at his house claiming they were journalists at a magazine and wanted to interview him. After the interview was over, the men left and Danny realized his photos were all gone as well. He then called the magazine they said they worked for, and they claimed they'd never heard of Danny, let alone commission an article about him. Things got worse when he suffered a heart attack, and even his doctor advised him to stop the research since it was jeopardizing his health. He gave up in the end and never saw the men again. And finally, at number 1 is the postman. A postal worker in Washington DC said he was delivering mail one day and decided to just chill and have an apple. He finished it and saw no trash cans around him, so he just threw it on the floor, after which a security guard approached him, lecturing him and telling him that the area and building he was in was under constant surveillance and that it's not safe for him to just throw apples around. He was like, okay boomer, and then just moved on with his life. A few days later, he was on his usual delivery route when he came back to the same building. He saw 3 men going towards the building, except they weren't men at all. They looked like they were waddling, not walking, and they were incredibly thin. If anything, it was their frames that freaked him out more than anything else. He went inside the building regardless, because aliens aside, he still had a job to do. Still gotta get that bread, you get me? Now, as soon as he set foot in the building, a group of men in black surrounded him, asking him what he had just seen. He was about to speak when one of the thin figures he saw earlier came up next to him, and then he just couldn't speak. He had lost the ability. No words were coming out, and he was horrified. The men then grilled him for hours and then let him go. The next day, his mail route had been changed. Starting us off for number 10 is Dr. Albert K. Bender. Albert was a famous researcher who actually founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau, which I didn't even know was real. You may not have heard of it because he abruptly shut it down after being visited by the Men in Black. By 1955, he was this close to releasing a paper proving the US government had covered up proof of UFOs. He was about to publish his paper in the Space Review, but alas, that was just never gonna happen. One night when Albert was in bed, he suddenly felt a nauseating, dizzy spell. All of a sudden, he started seeing multiple dark shapes appear in his room, and he legit thought it was just because he was about to pass out, but he was wrong. The shapes slowly took form and materialized into men in black suits and hats. He couldn't see their faces, but the only thing he could see were their eyes, and they were glowing. The men could somehow speak to Bender's mind directly without actually saying anything. They forced him to destroy all his findings and stop his research altogether. As soon as this encounter took place, Bender was scarred for life. He shut down the bureau straight away. His other work was almost unreadable, and he lived with perpetual anxiety and fear of the men for the rest of his life. He'd get continuous phone calls with no one on the other end, and he actually just ended up dying in 2002. Coming in at number 9 is Dan Aykroyd. Now, if you're unaware, Dan Aykroyd is a Canadian actor, musician, filmmaker, and much more. He was actually an original member of the Not Ready for Prime Time players on SNL back in the day. And I feel like it's a crime, but I actually have never heard of this man. Sorry. Either way, Dan came forward one day about how he was taping a show about the paranormal and the extraterrestrial. After his announcement, he stepped outside to take a phone call from Britney Spears, who asked him to be on SNL Live with her. While they were talking, Dan noticed a black Ford parked across from him on the street. A tall, pale man in a black suit stepped out of the vehicle and stared him down. It was like, you know, when you're at a club and a guy sees you and he's like looking up and down like he just found his prey. That's exactly what it was. Dan was like, what a creep, and turned around for a second, but when he looked back 2 seconds later, the car and man had disappeared. As soon as he walked back into the building, he was told his show was cancelled and to stop filming it there and then. Now, he knows exactly what he saw that day, and he's still adamant the Men in Black are the reason his show got cancelled. Dude, it's fine. Your show got cancelled, you're still on SNL Live with Britney Spears. I think you made it up. I think you can make do. At number 8, we have the library. Peter Roysevich, a professor of folklore, was sitting in the library reading a book on UFOs recommended by one of his colleagues. Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed a shoe and a leg, and then boom, a man in a black suit was just sitting right in front of him. How did he get there? Where did he go? Cotton Eye Joe. He immediately started asking Peter if he was interested in the book or had he even seen a UFO before, and Peter told him he wasn't interested and was just reading it as a recommendation, to which the guy got angry and shouted at him, asking how he could not be interested in the most important facts of the century. But that seemed to be a fake cover-up, since he seemed quite content that Peter wasn't interested in the subject, and then he just left. After the encounter, the professor was a bit shook up, so he got up to walk around the library, but strangely enough, no one was there. No students, no guards, not even the librarians. It was deserted. Slightly scared, he went back to his seat and walked around again an hour later to find people back in their places. Imagine just sitting in a library, being a tenured professor, someone comes at you, shouts at you for not liking UFOs, and then leaves. I'd be like, I'm failing you for that. You're not even in my class and I'm failing you. Filling on 7th slot is The Sighting. Paul Miller worked in the American Air Force, and one day while coming home from a hunting trip, he saw what looked like a gigantic luminous disc in the sky. He followed the disc and saw it land in an empty field, and out of it came 2 humanoid-looking figures. Army man Miller didn't even hesitate before pulling out his gun and shooting one of the figures, and as you can imagine, his aim was quite impeccable, so he was 100% sure he had hit one. He ran towards his car but realized he had suddenly just lost a lot of time. What should have been a 30-second encounter had been 3 hours long. Trying not to overthink it, he went back to work the next day and encountered 3 men in black. They told him that they had his file and they knew everything that had happened even though he hadn't told a soul. They gently threatened him, because I didn't even know you could gently threaten someone, saying it'd be best if he forgot the whole thing, and Paul was obviously terrified. They knew his address, his name, his parents' names and addresses, everything. So not wanting to take any chances, he said nothing. He actually sent me this whole story in a DM on Twitter. No, I'm kidding. Now at number 6 are the men in grey. I don't know, maybe they just got tired of all black all the time. I don't know. Sometimes I get tired of wearing black. Okay? Let them wear grey. Either way, this story comes from William Shearer, who lived in Essex, England at the time. He said he had once witnessed a UFO in the sky, and a few days later 2 men in grey suits who he'd never met before just randomly showed up at his house. One stayed in the car whilst the other sat grilling William about what he had seen. But he didn't seem to care about what he said, he seemed more concerned about gaining permission to enter his house somehow. I actually hate that. You know when you're talking to someone and you know they don't give a shit about what you're saying, and I'm just like, why am I still talking? And then you have to somehow just let the conversation end. Either way, what's weird was his voice was super odd. It was expressionless, flat, and his skin was extremely pale. Obviously, William did not let them into his house, but he would not get off that easy. The men told him they'd be back, and soon after they visited him at work. They told him they just wanted to talk to him about the UFO and asked to come in again, and again William refused, after which they both just disappeared into thin air. He never encountered them again, but he low-key thinks they tapped his phone, and William, they probably did. Coming in at number 5 is Larry. So this one was shared by a man named Larry, and yes, that's actually literally all I know about him, that his name's Larry. Either way, Larry was working the night shift at his job when he started falling asleep. But as soon as he was drifting, he was contacted telepathically by some presence or entity. The entity communicated that it wasn't from Earth, but gave him no other information. Being a skeptic, Larry was like, nah, and asked for some sort of proof of his existence, and the entity agreed that it would show up when Larry was chilling with his best friend. Months went by, but he couldn't stop thinking about the interaction. Eventually, he caught up with his best friend at an Independence Day celebration, and while they were eating, a black van pulled up. You already know shit's going down if a black van pulls up. 2 men in black suits came out, followed by 2 more, but the bizarre thing was that they weren't shaped like humans. They all sat near Larry's table, stared at Larry for a few minutes, and then just got up and left. That was it. The entity was probably like, I told you I was real. I am real. Peace. Deuces. Larry's like, what was that? Months of not being able to sleep for that. Either way, at number 4 is Frederick Holiday. Growing up, I think we all thought there was some sort of massive snake-like monster in Loch Ness, an ancient dinosaur, a mythical creature that was actually real. I don't know, whatever made our young hearts happy. I don't know. Your mom. No, I'm kidding. Frederick Holiday was known for his passion for cryptozoology and dedicated years of his life looking for evidence of life in Loch Ness. One day while investigating, Holiday looked towards a hill by the lake and saw a man in a black suit. Enter our brooding agent. Holiday thought it was just a random person given how much of a popular tourist spot it was, but he was slightly creeped out by the fact this man seemed to be staring straight at him despite being so far away. Frederick felt this malevolence and evil come off him that somehow reached him. Before he had a chance to remove himself from the situation, he heard a bizarre sound and the man just disappeared into thin air. He never saw him again, but a year later he went back to the lake for some more studies and ended up having a heart attack. The weirdest part, he died passing over the exact same spot the agent had been standing a year prior. And I feel like that very much was no coincidence. Filling at number 3 slot are Code 9 and 10. During the 60s, photographer Jim Templeton took a picture of his daughter near Burla Marsh. Now, I'm not gonna lie, it is a cute picture of her despite the astronaut looking figure right behind her head, so let's talk about that. The next day, while he was at work, 2 men showed up claiming they worked for the government. They wouldn't tell Jim anything about themselves or what department they worked for, they just told them one was called Code 9 and the other was called Code 10. Alright, I don't know why that just reminded me of Codename Kids Next Door. Either way, their badges didn't even indicate any particular government agency that he had heard of, but he still agreed to get in their car and drive back to the marsh. There, the men asked him how the weather was the day the picture was taken, how the animals were reacting, reacting, and he said they were huddled together as if they were scared of something. After saying that, the men became extremely hostile, claiming he was lying. How do you even get home from being in a random marsh? Hitchhike your way home. Now at number 2 is the Maury Island incident. Back in 1947, Harold Dahl and his son were putting logs on their fishing boat when they saw 6 donut-shaped crafts hovering above them. The spacecrafts dropped some kind of molten waste on the lake, which ended up killing Harold's dog and badly injuring his son. Upset by the event, he spoke to his boss and friends about the incident in the upcoming days, and eventually he was visited by a man in all black. The man forced him not to speak about the encounter, and a few days later, multiple Air Force agents visited Harold as well. They came to gather information from him about the incident, and it gained enough attention that the FBI actually wrote a report on the matter. But after meeting the man in black, Harold claimed the whole story was suddenly a lie, but years later confessed that it was actually the truth, but he was forced to say that it wasn't. Let me give you one chance to guess who forced him to say it was a lie. If you didn't guess Men in Black, then you're dumb. And finally, at number 1 is Wool. This was shared by an anonymous man who said he was sightseeing in Washington DC one summer and accidentally wandered into the State Department building. Okay, now first of all, I don't think anyone can just accidentally go in there. I'm sure there's intense security checks, but anyway, I'm not gonna fact check you, anonymous man. He wandered around the lobby before security started becoming suspicious of him and ushered him out of the building. But before they did, the elevator opened and 5 men came out. 1 was in a grey suit and 4 were in black suits wearing black hats that hid their eyes and faces completely. And despite it being summer, they were even wearing long black trench coats. As the group was walking by, one of the men in black slipped on the marble floor and fell and dropped his portfolio. The fall happened quite near to the man who was telling the story, so he helped him up, and while doing so he realized the man's legs seemed critically weak. Like, it felt to him like there was just a lot of wool under the suit, and that's what gave it its bulky, cartoonish appearance. The cherry on top of all of that was, despite falling on quite a hard marble floor, the man's expression never flinched or changed once. It's like he couldn't feel pain, he couldn't feel anything at all. And right next to the portfolio, the man found a coin that had writing on it in a language he couldn't recognize, with a wolf man on one side and 2 moons and some navigational lines on the other.
Want to see more alien photographs from history? Check out this video right here. We have so much more alien photographs that will simply blow your mind. Click now! What are you waiting for?